It's always exciting when a game dev company that I'm familiar with gets to make another game. With how turbulent the industry is, I just get stoked when I see a name I recognize releasing something new. And this time around, it's Devespresso, the creators of the side-scrolling horror series The Coma, and they are back with something that's a little different than their usual fare. While it does still pull in elements of horror, Vambrace Cold Soul is a dungeon crawling RPG first and a game about horror second. It plays pretty similarly to Darkest Dungeon, with you gathering a group of adventurers and setting out into procedurally generated sets of rooms as you make your way towards a boss fight and eventually get some actual progress going. With the exception of Lyric, the story's protagonist, everyone dies for good if either their health or their vigor reaches 0. Health is mainly drained by enemy attacks, and vigor is used for exploration, but there are traps and enemies along the way that can kind of target both. So here's the thing, there isn't actually a lot that Vambrace does to distinguish its gameplay from Darkest Dungeon. And I guess on one hand, it doesn't really need to. I mean, it's using a really good game's systems as a base and going from there, mainly relying on story and setting to differentiate it from its primary mechanical influence, and it shows, in good ways and in bad ways. It's almost like the mechanics of exploring a dungeon and their desire to have you see this whole real story are fighting against each other at times. There's this timer called a Geistometer that fills up as you explore. When it fills, every room's encounter becomes a fight with these freaky ghosts that are supposed to be super difficult, and the idea is to make every run a choice between reaching the end as quickly as possible and trying to explore and get some more loot. But these Geist fights are so often just the same groups of enemies, and they're so easy that they really end up being more of a nuisance than an interesting challenge. Couple that with the rewards for exploration being nothing more than sellable junk, and the Geistometer kind of stops being a catalyst for tense risk-reward scenarios and instead encourages you to beeline to the exit. If the Geist combat was mechanically different or more than just a weird waste of resources or any number of things, this could have been a pretty cool system and an interesting choice for players instead of just a timer, but it's not. It's one example of how Vambrace can't seem to decide if it wants to kick your ass or get you to the end. At the same time, there are systems that truly do make things harder and more interesting and sort of bleed into the story a little bit. You can only heal, use items, or change equipment at camps, and resting causes the Geist Tube timer thing to go up while also not guaranteeing any recovery. Status effects heavily debuff your party members, and if you're not careful, boss fights can really rip you a new one. In 2 words, it's weird. It really does feel like this game wants 2 flavors of cake but can't figure out how to make them work together, and it's a real damn shame because the world Devespresso's built here is pretty cool. A city imprisoned by a curse that makes everything not only super freaking cold, but that turns anyone who dies into wandering spirits that eventually go mad and attack anyone they see. And this city is fighting for survival while trying to maintain a tense balance between 6 factions living within it. It's a super cool idea, and they really sell the idea of this city and the world and existing within this, and that is this harsh environment. There's a codex that you unlock pages to as you play, and it's got all sorts of information on these races and factions and how they work, what they believe, why they do what they do, and it's really cool. But the gameplay is so divorced from that, while trying at the same time to make sure you see all of it, it just comes off as a confused mess. Vambrace Cold Soul tries to sell you on being this super difficult game with RPG mechanics and hard as hell dungeon crawling, but it feels like the desire to make sure you see the story ended up making the game easier and removing a bunch of the RPG stuff because there's like practically no real RPG mechanics to this. It's more confused than it should be, and it's easier than it should be to keep you from getting tired of repeating the same areas, and to make sure you keep progressing, and it really makes me wish they just committed fully to one or the other. Either make an incredibly difficult game and focus on making that an engaging experience, or make the story better than it is, or make the combat more interesting than it is. You know? As it stands, it's Darkest Dungeon, but a bit easier so you see the end, when it could have been Vambrace, a game with interesting dungeons to explore and a neat story that's also pretty hard. I had a decent enough time playing through Vambrace, but honestly I'd place it in the same vein as popcorn movies. It was something to do, and while I enjoyed it, I don't know if I'd recommend it to a friend unless they were really looking for something specific. So if you're looking for something as specific as Darkest Dungeon with an RPG/story spin, then you should check out Vambrace when it goes on sale. If you're not looking for that kind of thing, then I'd probably have to say that this one's a pass. Hey, thanks for peeping my review of Vambrace Cold Soul. I'd like to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters that help keep this boat afloat. Thank you to David Snotter, Mark B. Writing, Puking Goombas, Steve Z, and Storm Hughes. Your support means so much, and thank you. If you'd like to support Indie Bytes and everything that we do, head on over to patreon.com/IndieBytesYT to see how you can. That's all I got for now. I will see you next time. Bye!